Welcome to Biota Live. I'm Tom Barbalet, and this is a continuation of the Biota podcast. For more information about the Biota podcasts, check out biota.org/podcast. Well, we have three callers on the line. I think I might introduce our special guest first. Hello, Stefan.
Hello. Hello,
Good
Tom.
to talk to you.
This is Darius.
Hello, Bruce.
Hello, Tom.
Good to talk to you. And I think the final caller is probably Gerald in the Netherlands. Hello, Gerald.
Hello.
Good to talk to you.
Good, yes. Gerald from Rotterdam.
So the next episode on July 4th, the episode on the 4th of July, Friday, July 4th at 8 p.m. Pacific, the topic is Help Wanted. I put the call out earlier this week to existing artificial life projects, the maintainers of those existing artificial life projects, to see if they had any need for current developers, users, other kinds of interactive folk. So far I've had one email from an interested fellow who's doing cognitive simulation, which will be interesting to have more about his project on, but not the kind of response I was initially expecting. So if you're listening to Biota Live and you have an existing artificial life project that is desperately in need of developers or has future components that needs additional assistance, please get in contact with me, tom@noble8.com. It will also be a wonderful opportunity for you to showcase your project. I know certainly with, probably maybe all three participants on the call so far may have existing components of their project that need additional help, so we may open it up. Bruce, with the Evo Grid, you've got a lot of things that need doing currently. As you won't be on the call next week, what do you foresee your current needs as being with the Evo Grid?
Well, definitely continuing the discussion, and I think to prove the concept of the Evo Grid, the best thing would be is for two or more existing artificial life simulations, the simulators, to put up their hands and say, yes, I'd like to export the state of my simulation and package an object from the simulation that will be picked up by the other simulation. So very similar to the way Noble Ape has done its export XML, maybe finding another simulation out there that's willing to import that. And so things can travel across the boundaries.
Well, maybe this is a project for Stefan to consider with regards to Darwin Park. I certainly think the Noble Apes are never short of vegetation, so if they can eat components of Darwin Park or make shelters out of them or these kind of things, so much the better. And similarly, I'm sure Gerald's structures from Darwin at Home could also provide useful shelter for Noble Apes, even if they do wiggle a little bit. But continuing on, the Biota CDs have gone to press. There will be 1,000 Biota CDs arriving sometime in early July, of which probably between 350 and 400 will go to Artificial Life 11, and the remainder will be spread out through the broader Biota community and drop locations at universities, at institutions. I think you'll pick up 50, Bruce, aren't you, for your general travels?
I think so. And Tom, tell the audience what is on those CDs.
Well, I would like to say that I've taken the cream of the crop of the previous podcasts. However, that probably will offend podcasts that have been missed. I've taken, I think, probably a pretty fair selection of what we've discussed on Biota Live to date, plus the previous Biota podcast. Not any of the Biota 2 audio, actually, just the stuff that's been recorded since I started doing this more than 2 years ago, as a means of informing the broader community, in particular the academic community, that Biota Live is there, We've had a number of interesting topics, and I think that there's certainly a good deal of contributions that can be made from the broader artificial life academic community into the discussion. So the aim of the CDs is to put, I think it was about 16 hours worth of audio in MP3 form in front of at least 350 participants in Artificial Life 11 and their related students and other folk. Obviously, the folks attending Artificial Life 11 will get a CD, but there's also the option for them to get more CDs if they have students and things like that. Giving the Biota podcast a physical form in some regards so people can look at and listen to the CDs and then ideally pass them on as well. There's a section of the CD that says, once you've finished subscribing, or, if you want additional CDs, get in contact, but please feel free to pass this CD on to other people as well. So hopefully we'll see subscribers for many, many months to come from this initial Biota CD drop. An interesting phenomena. It's going to be interesting. The stuff we did with Graytham Boston, we did a test drop, I think, of 20 CDs at Graytham Boston. They were consumed very rapidly, and we had at least 20 new subscribers based on that drop alone, just working on the IP addresses. So I think we've already proven that if you give someone who's artificial life interested or artificial life curious a Biota CD, they will subscribe to the podcast, which is very good. Now, Graytham news. We've got both Bruce and Gerald's Graytham news. Gerald, it was your first Graytham, and I suspect you probably got more people than you were initially expecting. Please tell us more about the first Graytham meeting in the Netherlands.
We got about 15 people, and we gathered in this really nice room with two rows of sort of like stadium chairs. They were actually cinema chairs. And we talked in that environment, so it was really sort of a circular thing. When I think about the gathering, I always think how it could be done better next time. So I've got lots of ideas how to improve for next time. But it was a nice group of people, just getting to know each other for the first time. I think most of them were just curious. I didn't really encounter another practitioner. That makes it a little difficult to have interesting conversations. They're just curious. They're coming in. They're trying to figure out what this is. And I gave them an introduction to it and observed some interesting conversations.
Had you met Rudolph before?
I had never met him before, no. He appeared and stood up and gave everybody a talk after me. And it's the first time. Yeah,
he's not a practitioner, but he's certainly an instigator. And I think what we're finding is probably that there are just as many artificial life commissars going out and spreading the message than there are actual practitioners currently. Obviously, we'd prefer for there to be more artificial life practitioners, but the commissars have their role as well.
You need users. You need people to take a look at it and have an appreciation for it.
From last week also, they present the philosophy of artificial life in a slightly different context than we may as practitioners. And speaking of these things, Bruce, you met at the Internet Archive. How did it all go?
Oh, it was tremendous. We had it's an interesting location because it's the archive of the Internet in the Presidio, Brewster Kahl's organization. And we had really great presentations. John Cumbers presented his whole vision about astrobiology and synthetic biology and how you should be able to evolve from synthetic biology, which is real wet chemistry, DNA, RNA biology, and create creatures that are appropriate, say, to live in an asteroid or in Mars. And with the Phoenix landers, discovery of the soils this week on Mars and on the pole are quite appropriate. They're not acidic. They're quite basic. The Martian soil at the poles, at least, is pretty appropriate for living things. So that was incredibly exciting to hear about that. And then Jeffrey Ventrella showed us an evolving genetic algorithm music system plus another system. And we had another person who'd just come in. I can't call her name, but she showed a really tremendous environment that shows how the cells have sort of stickiness and grow together. And it was sort of a cell-based simulation. And there's a number of pictures that have hopefully been posted of that. And Alan Lundell recorded everything, and he will be putting up the high-def video sometime soon of that entire meeting.
Yeah, I think her name was Sharon Minsuk.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what struck me about the meeting, and I've propagated the photos through Facebook as I've been asked to do as well, is just the number of new faces, but also the number of familiar faces too. I think this is very powerful to folks like Gerald who are either anticipating or have just had their first Gratham meeting. We're going to talk a little bit about Brighton in a minute as well. People bring new people. There's a kind of cumulative effect. And certainly looking through the crowd, I couldn't put names to faces, but the faces looked familiar in terms of previous attendance, plus some new faces as well. And I think the critical mass is a very interesting thing to track. A lot of the stuff Jeffrey demonstrated was stuff that I'd already seen of his. I'm a consummate fan of Jeffrey's work, so the music stuff in particular I'd played with probably around the time of his first interview 2 years ago. Did he talk a little bit about bringing gene pool out open source? Was that discussed at all?
He was asked that question, I think, about all of his systems, and he said he planned to do it, but it wasn't ready to do it yet. He's actually making new versions of gene pool now and fixing bugs, so maybe that when he's done that, maybe he'll do that open sourcing.
Well, news from Gratham Brighton. I got an email this week from Jason Evans, and he demonstrated a wide variety of artificial life projects at a youth group. And this is interesting feedback, actually, from a practitioner. The video footage of the first official Gratham meeting in Silicon Valley has netted probably about 5 months' worth of changes for Noble Ape. Your demonstration of Noble Ape, Bruce, highlighted so many subtle flaws in the interface that I've gone back and taken quite consummate notes, and I'm in the process actually of doing implementations with regards to various components, including live help, which I think probably would have aided your demonstration a great deal. So for practitioners, these Gratham meetings are an amazing ability to get second-hand feedback. And I remember when we had Chris Hecker on, he said the demonstration of artificial life projects will yield the greatest feedback in terms of development, and I think that's certainly true. Anyway, Jason demonstrated a wide variety of projects and got amazing feedback from the children that he demonstrated the projects to, and I asked him if he would record an audio submission with regards to, what he saw in these kind of things, a kind of project log in audio form. I'm going to put that out to the broader Biota listening audience as well. If you have something exciting associated with artificial life that you participated in, or a software you've used, or if you want to give a project report or anything like that, feel free to either give it to me in writing, and I'll certainly discuss them in the Internet Radio Show, or even better, record yourself and email me the audio. I'm more than happy to put audio in either in the Biota feed or at the conclusion of these programs or during the programs to talk about. So for folks interested in calling in, the contact number is 646-200-0640. We have the pleasure of having Stefan Bornhofen on the phone from Paris. We also have a live chat for people interested in participating who don't want to call the US number. You can get to it from the Blog Talk Radio page, which you probably have open if you're listening live. So, Stefan, I have a number of questions with regards to your project, Darwin Park, but I guess the first is, what is the motivation for modeling plants?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because if you look at the literature, I think there are some very different motivations that can be identified. So on the one hand, above all, I think there is the biological motivation of understanding the life of natural plants. So understanding their development, their interactions, their role in natural ecosystems, and all this by means of simulation. And because a better understanding of plant communities is important for many domains, like ecology, forestry, agriculture, and so on. So the biologists develop simulation tools to describe and to predict the growth of natural plant species. So this is, I can say, the biological perspective. But in the context of artificial life, there are some other motivations that can be identified. So in my opinion, besides the biological aspects, there is the idea of creating real-world inspired virtual universes that can be explored by users via avatars. So this context raises the problem of how to convincingly represent plant life in virtual worlds. And this is the more fundamental question about why are we creating virtual worlds. So I think there's, on the one hand, there's the idea of creating virtual worlds that from an entertainment point of view, and on the other hand, there is the scientific point of view. And these 2 points, they are merged, fused in the existence of virtual worlds. And I think another important motivation in the context of artificial life is that plant development can be used as a context for studies in artificial evolution. For example, if you want to study some specific dynamics in genetic programming, you can use virtual plants as the phenotype space, because plant growth is pretty visual and intelligible, and this helps understand what's happening in your evolutionary system. So I think these are the major motivations of plant modeling.
So specifically, how do you actually model the plants?
You can say a plant can be modeled in many ways. Generally speaking, they can be modeled at community level and at individual level. So at community level, there are, for example, aggregate mathematical equations, that describe a number of individuals of one or several competing populations. Or another population-level approach, but using individual-based modeling, is a representation of plants as two-dimensional circles on a plane. So these circles indicate the range of influence. And when these circles increase, this means that the plant grows. And when two circles intersect, there is a competition between the two corresponding plants. So these are approaches of plant modeling at a population level. So now if we zoom in, we can look at modeling of individual plants. In this context, there is a classic distinction between morphological and physiological models. Morphological models describe the structural development, which means the 3D architecture of the plant. The most common approach is called the L-system formalism. So this is based on symbol strings. So a plant morphology is described by bracketed expression. It means a concatenation of symbols containing terminal and non-terminal characters. And there is a set of rules, a set of production rules, which specifies how to replace the non-terminal characters by new symbols. Repeated application of these rules leads to more and more complex bracketed strings, and such strings can be interpreted geometrically as a branching structure. So this is a classic approach of a morphological model. So these morphological models, they do not feature any resource dynamics, assimilation, allocation. So there's another component of a virtual plant, which is a physiological one. And traditionally, there are pure physiological models that divide a plant into a fixed number of compartments, like, for example, a root compartment, stem compartment, leaf compartment. And then these models describe the resource dynamics, the resource flow, and allocation, most often in terms of differential equations. So if you put together these two approaches, since a couple of years, they are merged into one. These are the so-called functional structural models. So functional for the function, which means the physiology, structural for the architecture, that features a morphological and a physiological component. So these models are currently the most complex approaches to virtual plants.
And in terms of plant simulation, how is this in an artificial life context?
In artificial life context, well, I think in artificial life plant models, like any artificial life models, they are typically based on the concept of simplification, bottom-up modeling, and emergence. I think that biological plant models, they try to model specific natural species. So artificial life plants, they deal with plant-like structures in virtual environments that exhibit dynamics more or less close to natural plants. Do you see the difference?
Certainly.
Where we do not seek to create accurate models of real-world plants, but we create plant-like structures that we compare to real-world plants. Yes, that's a good explanation.
Now, in terms of moving artificial life, what do you see as being the distinctions between moving artificial life and plant artificial life?
Most importantly, it's that plants are organisms without any central control unit. So there's no need to address the problem of complex perception and reasoning. So plants don't move, they don't think. This shifts the focus to one of the most basic activities of an organism, that is morphogenesis. We could say that plants can simply be modeled as emerging, self-assembling structures composed of atomic elements. We call them modules. So modules are leaf, flower, fruit, and so on. So this situation is quite perfect for artificial life models.
And what's the state of the art in terms of contemporary artificial life plant simulation?
Well, state of the art. There's some good literature on evolving plants in the context of genetic programming. I don't know if you know the works published by Christian Jacob and Marc Toussaint. They take the phenotype space of virtual plants and study the dynamics of their evolutionary algorithms. And then there are many projects featuring plants for virtual online worlds, like Bruce Damer's Nerf's Garden. I hope he can tell us more about this.
But specifically about your project, Darwin Park, can you describe what it is?
Darwin's Park is basically a simulation platform intended for the study of the dynamics that emerge in a simplified virtual ecosystem. So a system where different ecological agents interact and co-evolve. Darwin's Park is a continuous three-dimensional environment featuring resources that can be taken up and processed by the agents. And the most important agent type in Darwin's Park is currently the virtual plant.
Now, I have a question for Bruce here, actually, because I've been reading his original Nerve Garden paper. You've been following Darwin's Park, obviously, through its progression. Can you discuss a little bit about how it's based in Nerve Garden and how it's moved to where it is currently, Bruce?
Well, Nerve Garden, just for the audience, a little bit of background. In 1995 in SIGGRAPH, there was a University of Southern California project called, I think it was called the Telegarden. Yes, it was the Telegarden, and basically it was, and this was, I think, also shown in Ars Electronica in Austria, in Linz, and it was a robot that you could program, run over the web, and move and put a plant in the ground, or put a seed. It would put a seed into the ground, into a physical plant box, and you could then, and you saw a webcam view of it, and you could also have it water the plant or several plants, and you created it was quite a phenomenon, and you could create and grow plants over many weeks using the Telegarden. And we were inspired by the fact that when Biota was founded in 1996, and the first project we did was called Nerve Garden, which was inspired by the Telegarden. And it basically said, let's do the Telegarden in a virtual world. In order to do that, we selected L Systems, Lindenmayer Systems, from the wonderful book, The Algorithmic Beauty of Plants. And I had met Prushinkevitz, or Dr. P as he's called, at the, he was part of our Digital Burgess, the first Biota conference, and he was one of our speakers. And so for SIGGRAPH 97, their electronic sort of experiments area was called the Electric Garden. So we were perfectly suited to get a proposal approved, and we built this L Systems seeder environment where the public could come in, pick an L system, and then put it into a Java-based 3D environment, early one, built by Chris Laurel, and extrude a plant to a certain point. And then they would pick the plant and they would put it onto a common island in a large VRML scene driven by an SGI Onyx 2 that was also projected on a big screen. So as the public came in, they were planting their plants, and the island would email them its location so they could go back and find it when they got home. So the idea was that they would come and see the collective creation of these L system forests, if you will, on these islands. And the goal we always had, of course, none of these are just basically model extrusions. They're not. There's no dynamic feedback in the environment. There are little insects flying around and cameras and things like that. But the goal for Nerve Garden 2 was always, the second edition would have been to have the plants affected by the sunlight hitting them and the minerals in the soil or moisture in the soil, and insects operating as what we call polyvores, or that eat polygons, which is sort of a funny play on herbivore. And then you'd get kind of a reaction to having leaves chopped off and stems removed. It would be kind of like topiary. And Nerve Garden 2 would be more of a living, evolving thing. And it just was beyond the capabilities of the technology of the day of the late 90s to do that. And when I had met Claude Latoud at the Virtual Worlds conference in, I think it was 1999 or 98 in Paris, and hosted by J.C. Houdan. And he's just doing really tremendous work. And when they started on Darwin's Park, which I think had another name originally, I realized that they were going to really take Nerve Garden to the next step, and they have. And you can go in, if you're running Darwin's Park, you can actually start multiple types of L-system plants in different locations. The plants shade each other. They respond to, they're responding to the sunlight they're receiving and nutrients in the soil, so the root systems will follow the pathways of the nutrients. And it could really be used for plant productivity models for crop research, agricultural research, and just to create really cool virtual worlds, and to also participate in the polyvore type experiment with creatures, noble apes appearing suddenly in Darwin's Park and eating some of the plants, as apes do eat a lot of plants.
They do.
That's the connector, I think, hopefully for the audience here.
And yes, there's actually a section in the original manuals of Noble Ape that deals with noble apes that become, I guess I want to say shamans, but more like kind of medicine apes that go and find various berries and test them out on the rest of the tribe and things like that. So there's a long narrative with regards to all possible uses of plants, including building structures and these kind of things. But Stefan, Bruce has given a wonderful overview, but can you give a brief explanation of your model in Darwin's Park?
Well, first, there is the environment. So the plants grow in a three-dimensional environment that has two components. We call them the soil and the sky. Okay, both of them, they have an environmental resource. The sky provides light, which can be captured by the leaves, and the soil contains minerals that can be assimilated by the roots. Now, I think it would be too complex to ray trace the light or to simulate the grains of sand in the soil. On the other hand, it is very important to create a certain environmental heterogeneity. Otherwise, the interactions between the plants and the environment would be very limited. So we decided to use an intermediate approach by dividing the environment into a number of cubes. I call them the voxels, and each voxel contains a certain amount of resources, which means that the sky voxels, they hold a local luminosity, and the soil voxels contain a local mineral concentration. There are different resource dynamics between these voxels. So in the sky there is shading, so the virtual light has a certain direction, and every above ground object casts shadows. So which means that it decreases the luminosity in the voxels following the direction of the light. And concerning the soil, there are also dynamics. There is diffusion between the voxels, so the nutrients move from regions of high concentration to regions of low concentration. So this is the environment. Now we put the virtual plants into this environment, and these plants, they start with as a seed, okay, and then when they germinate, they are described by two L systems: the above ground L system and the below ground L system, two parts. Call them the shoot and the root part. So each part is responsible for the assimilation of one resource. So the shoot captures the virtual light with the leaves and photosynthesizes sugars, and the root assimilates the minerals in the soil. And then there is a resource flow. So this is the physiological part of the plant model. So there's a resource flow between the two compartments, a mineral flow from the root up to the shoot, and a sugar flow from the shoot down to the root. And now, to grow, each compartment converts one sugar unit plus one mineral unit into one biomass unit. These dynamics are well known in the scientific community of biologists. It's called the transport resistance model. So when a compartment has accumulated a certain amount of biomass, so the next morphological developmental rule, the next L system rule, is applied, and the plant grows.
Now, you've talked about growth, but you haven't talked about reproduction or seed carrying. Can you talk a little bit about, do the plants have flowers? Do they produce seeds?
Yes, definitely. They have flowers, they produce flowers, and then there is a probability of pollination. And if the flowers are pollinated, they produce a seed. So now the precise reproduction depends on the experimental setup. So we have two approaches of plant evolution. The first one is explicit selection. This means we use a genetic algorithm with given fitness functions. So just like, for example, calcium block creatures, we measure a certain fitness. Of course, we don't measure locomotion of the plants, but there are other interesting criteria to define. For example, the number of flowers, or the number of seeds, or the growth rate of the plants. And then we take the best individuals of the current generation and reproduce them artificially. We cross over their genotypes. We introduce mutations via genetic operators that act on the plant genotypes, and then finally analyze the resulting plants after about 1,000 generations. Okay, so this is the first approach. And the second approach is implicit selection, which means that the plants freely reproduce within the virtual environment. So they grow, they produce flowers, they produce seeds. The seeds are dispersed around the plant, and so on. And the only fitness criterion is survival and reproductive success. So this corresponds to Darwin's struggle for existence.
Now, in terms of the kinds of plants you simulate, what kinds of plants do you simulate?
We have an artificial life model, so this means that we did not seek to model specific natural species, but we have a generic plant model representing the most familiar group of plants. You could say the green land plant, like trees, flowers, ferns, and so on. I think the scientific term of these plants is embryophytes.
You've given two descriptions with regards to your use of genetic algorithms. Do you, for example, in the one where you do the 1,000 cycles versus, for example, the more natural simulation, do you phylum group the plants after a period of time?
We did not try and classify the emerging plants into species, but we observed that the evolved morphologies, for example, have similarities to existing real-world plants. So we observe classic trees and bushes, fern-like star-shaped architectures, or long structures without branching like ivy. So you can draw comparisons between our plants and the natural plants.
Can I ask a question here? I'm wondering, Stefan, what's the programming environment in which you're doing these experiments? Sounds fascinating.
It's entirely written in C++. We wrote it from scratch. We use a graphical output which is based on the Augur graphics library.
Okay.
And I want to point out something here. Digital space, in all of our NASA work, we also use Augur as a component. And one of the things I'd like to offer, and I've offered it to Claude, and he's quite interested, is when you're done in your next round of changes and upgrades, you might consider somehow using digital spaces framework for another round of Darwin's Park, because you will get the Python language, ODE physics, a huge framework, multi-user, etc., just by attaching Darwin's Park into our Augur framework. And it might be easy, it might be hard, but it's all Augur, it's all the same platform, and I extend the invitation to do that if you like.
Yeah, sounds fascinating, really great.
It also gives the opportunity to grow plants in space, which I think has been a theme on the previous Biota podcasts as well. So, Stefan, I'm interested in modeling fungus with regards to noble ape. Do you also model fungus?
Yeah, we had a previous version of Darwin's Park where fungi were modeled, so we plan to add them to the new version as soon as possible, because fungi are interesting organisms. You don't have to think that they are plants. Fungi cannot photosynthesize, they have to feed on other organisms. So some fungi hold a symbiotic relationship to plants. So this relationship is called mycorrhiza. So the fungi get the sugar from the plant, and in return they share their mineral nutrients with the plant. So this is interesting because the modeling of fungi would allow observing a new type of coevolution, which is based on a positive relationship, in contrast to the coevolution we observe in Darwin's Park right now, within plant communities typically based on competition.
Fascinating. And I guess there's a potential for insect life, and if you look at the consumption of plants by small animals, rodents, these kind of things, these dramatically affect the way the plants grow. Do you foresee a situation where you also start including insects and small rodents and things like that into Darwin's Park?
Of course, we hope that eventually we get real virtual ecosystem with different ecological actors interacting with one another. So for now we have the plants, then we get the fungi, so another type of non-moving agents, then the insects. But I think we have to be careful with what we add to such models, because every new dynamics we add is a new complexification, and this might hamper the extraction of what we want to observe.
I have a slightly different view, because my observation, particularly with regards to additions of animal species in a simulation environment, is that it in fact creates a greater degree of stability in the long term. That what you start observing is things in terms of emergence. If you're looking to create a simulation that has emergent properties that you never initially thought about seeing, adding these kind of, as you say, complexification elements can oftentimes promote the kind of emergence that you ideally would like to see in an artificial life simulation. In terms of the future, what do you see Darwin's Park being used for in the future? And in terms of a broader artificial life plant simulation perspective, what would you like to see in the future with artificial life plant simulations?
Well, our results, they suggest that a lot of dynamics observed in nature, they readily emerge in virtual plant communities. So I think there are two major perspectives. One perspective is I hope that there will be a growing exchange between A-life plant modeling and biological plant modeling, that these two approaches eventually merge. And on the other hand, I hope that current virtual worlds, they start to integrate growing structures, because if you take current virtual worlds like Second Life, for example, so the plants are nothing more than a static item. So it would be an interesting next step to integrate A-life plant model into this kind of online virtual world. So more generally, I think that A-life plant simulation is an important first step towards the modeling of entire virtual ecosystems. But this requires, of course, more computational power.
Do you think what you are doing currently with Darwin's Park can give answers with regards to how to actually utilize the computational power in the future? Are there things that you're finding through developing Darwin's Park that you think will be useful when you deal with, multi-core processors or cluster networks or these kind of things?
We definitely do not focus on technical aspects like how to increase the performance. So our research with Darwin's Park addresses questions like which morphological and physiological traits evolve in a virtual environment? How do the plants adapt to variations of the environmental conditions, like a lack of resources? And can these adaptations be compared to observations on natural plants? And to what degree do these results corroborate biological theories? We focus on the biological aspect, and we hope that we are able to integrate it in other existing virtual worlds.
Personally, when I look at artificial life simulation, I think of the computational power almost being like physics in the real world. That if you choose to ignore physics in the real world, you can do quite a bit. But if you start to embrace physics in the real world, you start getting motors and combustion engines and a wide variety of other things. Do you think there will be a shift in the future in Darwin's Park into actually looking at these questions of visualization and computation?
If we integrate other agent types, specifically in particular the mobile agents, we have to integrate much more dynamics, physical dynamics. But for plants, this is not really dispensable, because plants, they grow to resources, but since they do not move, they have very limited collisions and interactions, and so we could spare all these aspects for now. I agree that if we add other agents, there will be a tremendous amount of work which has to be done considering all these physical aspects.
In terms of the area that you are currently simulating, this is another question with regards to computation. You're obviously simulating in a fixed or relatively fixed area in terms of the voxel volumes. Do you foresee Darwin's Park expanding into much larger areas as computation gets to a scale where this can be done?
It would involve a network of computers like a grid networking, because one local machine is able to simulate, let's say, 1,000 plants, but above that it's difficult for one machine. So if you really want to have an ecosystem, an entire forest of plants, of trees with zillions of leaves, it is very important to find solutions to get Darwin's Park into a network.
So these really are the challenges for the future.
Yes, because the experiments we do for now, the results can be achieved with 1,000 plants. Okay, there's no difference between 1,000 and 1 million plants. Qualitatively, it will be the same. But if we talk about plants in virtual worlds with users exploring the world, this is another pair of shoes.
Gerald, with 9 minutes remaining, I know you've been waiting patiently. Do you have any questions for Stefan?
I don't know. I mean, I would like to be able to play with this kind of thing. So I would like to see it in an open source format. I do have one very specific question. Greythumb Netherlands is planning to have a second get-together in September in The Hague. And I was wondering if I could get Stefan to come up north and give us a talk.
Oh, sounds interesting. I will write it down.
Okay.
Wonderful.
It's not exactly, we haven't picked out the date yet, but it'll probably be in the beginning of September somewhere.
And certainly Bruce has done demonstrations. He did at the first formal Greythumb of Darwin's Park. So I believe that you can actually get the application. How did you get Darwin's Park, Bruce?
Claude sent me a link. I guess it's not really a published link, but maybe we can get some screenshots perhaps up on the podcast page so people can see what it'll be like when it's released, if that's all right.
Yes, I found a deep FTP link, which doesn't provide it in a single downloadable, but provides it in components, which I think is the current active distribution that's done internally in Paris. What you've described, Stefan, has excited probably at least Gerald and myself in terms of open source development. I think what you've described, particularly with regards to the problems in the future in terms of the processing and these kind of things, are certainly things that Gerald and I have looked at independently, and a number of the other listeners to Biota Live. So it'll be interesting when the source code is released, the kind of feedback that the broader artificial life community can give with regards to optimization. I know, Bruce, when you demonstrated Darwin's Park, you mentioned that the frame rate can slow down quite dramatically as the plants become more complex.
Yeah, that was actually a problem for us in Nerve Garden at SIGGRAPH in '97. We kind of gradually choked an Onyx 2 graphics supercomputer as we added more and more L system plants. It became apparent that there had to be some kind of culling algorithm going on.
There's a good solution to that, I think, which would be, level of detail calculations. You can, in a lot of games, it's the case, when you approach something, it gets more detailed. So you can do that sort of tricks, I think.
Yes, that's right. It's quite obvious that if you only one large tree is sufficient to slow down the computer, and there need solutions to be found how to overcome these kind of problems, right? For example, the level of detail, like you said, or perhaps one could merge the atomic items, the atomic leaves, into one mesh, so it could be processed by the computer more rapidly. I think there are solutions, but as I said, for now, all these kind of technical issues, they were just secondary, because we really try to progress in biological research.
Do you have a date set when Darwin's Park will be released open source?
My deadline is my PhD for now. This summer I want to finish my PhD, to write everything down. And then I think I try to continue to develop Darwin's Park in terms of technical details, and to open it to increase, for example, to improve the interface. Because in my opinion, a user who has no knowledge about the interior process of Darwin's Park has quite difficulties to use it. So there is a lot of work to be done to make the interface more intuitive. And
what's exciting about this is that you've already done the work with respect to how the system works and sort of the scientific analysis of how all the interactions happen. So there's a lot of good work that someone would be able to inherit if they were to take on the task of building an interface.
Okay, I see. Right.
Yes, I think that's the general consensus, and certainly this is the feedback that we've given to Jeffrey Ventrella as well, that releasing things open source, there are two schools of thought, and one says, well, it needs to be perfect before we release it open source, and the other says, in order to get it perfect, we need to release it open source, and unfortunately, in order to get it perfect, we need to release it open source seems to be certainly the way Gerald and I came to releasing our projects open source. So we do evangelize from that standpoint. So with 4 minutes remaining, Stefan, do you have anything more that you would like to add?
Yes, I would like to know what the others think about the question why we create virtual worlds, because this is something really fascinating myself, and I would like to know what the others think about the motivations of creating virtual worlds.
You got to hand this to Bruce.
Yeah, well, I'd like to start by saying, because this is such an important question, we're going to go overtime on it. So we have 3 minutes remaining, but let's throw that aside. Let's just talk about this, because I think it's a fascinating question that motivates some discussion. Bruce, why do we make virtual worlds?
I think it's sort of a primordial fascination humans have with creating little universes, playing God, playing games, being sociable in a little universe. We're story animals. We like to watch people, soap operas, and people play with other people. We like to do gardens. We like to manipulate the world. We're primates. We're binocular. We're depth perceivers. And this medium is irresistible to us.
And I think it fascinates different primates different ways. I mean, what we have here is 4 engineers talking about engineering these environments, and as engineers, we can gather together and think about these environments in terms of, abstract software engineering problems. But as Bruce has touched on, there are a number of levels to virtual worlds. Gerald, what's your own thinking with regards to virtual worlds?
Same as Bruce, more or less. I mean, it becomes exciting when you can actually meet people inside them and hang out with them. So, the social and the fact that it removes all geography, or distance becomes unimportant. You can actually, hang out on a hammock with somebody on a hilltop, and meanwhile this person is somewhere else on the planet.
Can I reformulate the question then?
Certainly.
Why do we create virtual creatures in virtual worlds?
Well, my feeling is that, as I described with some kind of high level, there are different kinds of people that have different kinds of interests. I think universally amongst the artificial life folk that I've talked with, there seems to be a primal fascination with regards to things which aren't properly being explained by contemporary science in some regard, or perhaps not correctly communicated, as Gerald may want to rephrase me as saying. And I think the interesting thing with regards to creating creatures and ecosystems and these kind of things is that we can start putting our own knowledge and our own theories to the test in some regard. It is a reinforcing experiment. And certainly in my own thinking with regards to developing Noble Ape, you develop an amazing kinship, and this came through in recent correspondence with Gerald too. You develop an amazing kinship not only with regards to the environments that you create, but also with regards to other people who have created their own particular environments. And I think this is the beautiful idea with the Evo grid is, in fact, you get the high-level simulators communicating, and then you get their simulations communicating. And I don't know in terms of whether it is something which is, fundamentally psychological, whether it fits in with Bruce's narrative in terms of storytelling and imaginary worlds or these kind of things. But I think there's a strange transition which, Stefan, you mentioned with regards to the idea of taking real-world plants and then making virtual plants that are in some regard not directly connected, but take the same kind of basic ideas.
Stefan, you've been making creatures for your own reasons, which were, I believe, until this point, largely scientific. Somebody else might make them, from a very different perspective. Like Jeffrey Ventrella is, his background is art school. He's an artist. So, and in a way, the things I do, I consider to be, art as well to some degree. It's just, it's another medium, like a paintbrush in a way.
So have we started to answer your question, Stefan, or do you need to rephrase it again?
It's great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, we went slightly overtime on this as an example of questions that will force us to go overtime. But next week, somewhat topically, we are going to be talking about others' artificial life projects and their immediate needs for assistance. Bruce, as we've gone overtime, would you like to do a little wrap about what you're going to be doing in the next 3-4 weeks?
Yeah, it's actually quite exciting and relevant to both Grey Thumb and Biota. I'm going to be traveling a week from today, to London, where I think I'm starting a PhD program, like Stefan, at a university there. It's a directed research mid-career PhD program. It's international. And the very topic of my proposed topic is the EvoGrid. That will be what I'm discussing with the program director on Tuesday, Wednesday, and we have an all-week seminar where the other PhD students are also there. And on Friday the 11th of July, is the Grey Thumb London meeting at the British Computer Society right in central London on Southampton Street. And I'm going to be basically presenting the EvoGrid vision, and Justin Lyon will also be there talking. And it should be quite a week, actually. I'm going to try to contact other people interested in artificial life in London while I'm there. And that'll be a sort of a week of Grey Thumb and Biota and my beginnings of my PhD work.
Terrific. And do you think the Brighton folk will come up to that Grey Thumb London, or do you have plans to go down to Brighton?
I probably don't have time to get down to Brighton, so I do hope some of them, if they are in the city or if they can come up, it would be absolutely splendid. As I'll be back in the UK 2-3 times a year to work on the doctoral program, I'm going to most certainly make it down to Brighton for one of their meetings as well. And I'm hoping to go up to Oxford to go back and see Richard Dawkins.
Certainly, and maybe even go to the Netherlands to complete your full tour of all Grey Thumbs worldwide so far.
I'd love to go back and see Gerald, and especially if there's some kind of World Cup final going on in Rotterdam.
And Gerald, in terms of the energy, I guess, that the first Grey Thumb meeting gave you, did it give you any food for thought with regards to your development of Darwin at Home currently?
It was certainly an opportunity to tell my most recent story and to try and make the case, and it was a lot more difficult than I thought. Actually, it seemed more abstract when I was describing it to other people. I guess I've been into it too deeply myself up till now. But it was interesting to be able to present it and get some feedback on it, and I think there are a number of people really dug it, so we'll see what happens.
In terms of the 15 that attended, were you able to get a sense of how they found out about it and what their broader artificial life interests are?
A lot of the people were people who actually just know me and know my project, so they just decided to sniff it out. And there were a few others that were invited. It was publicly, on the site of Worm, so people just found it as well.
Yeah, I heard this week about the Buckminster Fuller Institute here in the US and the fact that they give an annual prize that is relatively substantial. In terms of your work's links to Buckminster Fuller, have you ever considered approaching the Institute?
I used to have some contact with the Institute a number of years ago. I had no idea they had a prize like this.
Yeah, no, it's quite substantial. It's I believe it was about $100,000 this year, but I could be completely wrong. That could be the total prize. But it was enough that made me take note. I'm not sure whether they're US or North American specific. It went to a fellow who's doing regenerative growth in the Appalachians with regards to quarries. But I think certainly as you have a long history with regards to Buckminster Fuller's work and how it's impacted you, similar to Dawkins' work, it was an interesting angle that immediately resonated with me.
Sounds interesting. I'm certainly, on the Buckminster Fuller tour with this tensegrity thing, because it puts me on the outside of the architecture community as well, on the fringes, just like Fuller was.
It actually forced me to read about tensegrities too.
By the way, at the Grey Thumb Netherlands meeting, there was one fellow who actually took exception to the fact that I was evolving architecture. He didn't trust the blind architect.
Yes, I think it's interesting, your analysis with regards to firstly giving a demonstration talk to a group of architects who are probably not even artificial life curious, but when you're surrounded by maybe even artificial life critical folk who are also thoroughly interested in artificial life, the whole dynamic changes. And I think that's certainly something that I've taken away from, particularly looking at the Boston talks. I can imagine after people conclude their talks at Boston, because I guess they've had 2 years worth of folk coming through, the conversations following, and perhaps Bruce can talk on this, are probably considerably more critical and dissective than we're normally used to, even doing things like Biota Live. Was this your experience, Bruce?
The meetings, when there's time for people to really talk, the questions are incredibly penetrating and informed. Very intelligent people come to these meetings.
The topic next Friday, 4th of July, 8 p.m. Pacific, is Help Wanted. If you have an artificial life project you would like me to talk about with regards to needing additional assistance, any kind of assistance. In fact, I can't really imagine someone who had an artificial life project who wouldn't want to at least have their project aired in this kind of forum with regards to the potentials for the future. Please get in contact, tom@noble8.com, if you'd like to record some audio for me. I will certainly put it in the feed. Similarly, if you'd like to participate, the time again, 8 p.m. Pacific on Friday, the 4th of July. We also have an active chat window for folks in Australia or other parts of the world, in Asia or parts of Europe that can just make the call. I know it's 5 a.m. for you, Gerald, isn't it? It'll be for Stefan as well, I assume.
That's correct.
Strictly for the hardcore if you want to actually wake up and participate. But does this excite you enough to call in next week, Gerald?
Oh, yeah, sure. Why not?
Wonderful. Well, I'd like to thank Stefan in particular for coming on Biota Live today. And please, you're more than welcome to come on in the future. And similarly, anyone who's involved with Darwin's Park, it would be lovely to have Claude on the podcast or anyone else who'd like to participate in these discussions, Stefan.
Thank you very much. It was a really interesting talk.
Wonderful. Well, I'd like to thank Gerald and Bruce. We won't be hearing from Bruce for 3-4 weeks, you think, Bruce?
Yeah, I'll be on hiatus.
So we look forward to hearing your adventures when you get back, and look forward to talking to you next week, Gerald.
Okay.
Thank you all very much.